Hey guys, you need to watch this video if you did not come to our ELA Zoom meeting today. We're going to be learning about a new genre in reading workshop, and I'm so excited to share with you a rich and exciting genre called fiction. I hope you'd like to use your imagination to think of wonderful and exciting new ideas. I know I love using my imagination too. Fiction is amazing because it allows us to explore faraway lands, new worlds, and unique ideas with our imaginations. Writers of fiction use their imaginations to create entertaining stories for their readers. While there are many different types of fiction, we're going to begin our study with the following types: realistic fiction, myths, and folk tales, or traditional literature from other cultures. So let's think about what we know about each of these types of fiction. Traditional literature is stories from around the world that have been told and passed down from generation to generation. These would include folk tales and myths. Folk tales are passed down orally by different cultural groups, meaning a storyteller will tell them to a group of people, and then that group of people would tell other people, and so on and so on. And then they're passed down from like the grandmothers to the grandchildren to the great grandchildren, and so on and so forth. Myths are stories that are inspired. Myths are stories that explain natural events. They provide lessons about good and bad behavior. A myth will have like a god or a goddess or somebody, a supreme being with these magical powers, or it could have humans that have to interact with these gods and goddesses to do different tasks to get themselves out of trouble or to earn a prize or something like that. And then last, realistic fiction. These are made up stories that could possibly happen in real life. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the characteristics. This first story is Jalapeno Bagels. If I were trying to decide what genre this book is, then I might look at the front cover. I see a boy with an open sign, which makes me think he's standing in a store. And I also see the window of the store covered with lots of bread. So I'm thinking this might be a bakery. And so inside, I can use the front flap as a summary. It says, Pablo can't decide what to take to school for International Day. He wants to pick something from the bakery his parents own, something that represents his heritage. But what? There are pan dulce and shango bars that his Mexican mother prepares, but the bagels and challah made by his Jewish father are equally tempting. Then, when Pablo begins to help his parents prepare the Sunday morning baking, he comes up with the perfect choice. And so one thing you might notice in this book are the illustrations. So this looks like a kitchen at home. The setting kind of changes. Now this doesn't look like a kitchen at home. This looks more like an industrial kitchen, like in a restaurant or a bakery. And then we have lots of different kinds of bread and doughs. And we have the whole family working together on these new, jalapeno bagels, because I see jalapeno peppers and I see donut-y shapes that look like bagels. And so this story, to me, would tell me by looking at those illustrations and reading that summary, this is realistic fiction. I don't think Pablo waves a magic wand or asks the gods to help him. It doesn't sound like a story where Pablo is going to learn a lesson because of some controversy that he gets into. So I would put this book in the realistic fiction section. The next story. The next book I want to introduce to you is called The Gods and Goddesses of Olympus. So this story, if I look on the back, there's a summary. Long ago in ancient Greece, people created stories, myths, to explain the mysteries of life. These myths told of gods and goddesses, fearful monsters, brave heroes, and mysterious beauties. In these pages, you will meet the great immortals, Zeus, the powerful king of the gods, and Hera, his beautiful yet jealous wife. You will meet Athena, who sprung from Zeus's head, fully grown. Wow, talk about a headache. You will meet the lovely Aphrodite, who rose out of the sea on a cushion of foam. You will hear the story of the fierce battle fought to earn them their golden thrones. The awesome Olympians of Greek mythology come to life as Aliki skillfully weaves many of the tales that have fascinated children for generations. And so this story, The Palace in the Sky, is all about these gods and goddesses of Olympus. And so these are stories that are myths. They're going to explain things that happened in nature, or they're going to explain how this person triumphed over this person or tricked this person or that person, and how they became so all powerful. Okay, and the last one that I'm going to share with you, so that this one would be an example of traditional literature, and the category, the subgenre would be a myth. So this one is called The Adventures of Spider, West African Folk Tales. And so I can already in the title tell that this is a folk tale. These are stories passed down from generation to generation. And it says, "Come sit by the fire and listen as the storyteller brings to life a favorite character from West African folklore, the mischievous and clever spider. Through tales of how he got a thin waist to why he lives on ceilings, Spider is sure to delight readers with his outrageous wit and boldness." So I'm going to read one of the stories in here today. This one is How the Spider Got a Thin Waist. Many dry seasons ago, before the oldest man in our village can remember, before the rain and the dry and the rain and the dry that any one of us can talk about to his children, Spider was a very big person. So a lot of myths will start this way. Many seasons ago, fairy tales usually start once upon a time. And so that's a characteristic of a folk tale, is when it starts out long ago, many seasons ago. Okay, back to the story. He did not look as he looks today, with his fat head and his fat body and his thin waist in between. Of course, he had 2 eyes and 8 legs, and he lived in a web, but none of him was thin. He was big and round, and his waistline was very fat indeed. Today he is very different, as all of you know, and this is how it came to pass. One day Spider was walking through the forest. It was early morning, and he noticed an unusually pleasant smell. He wrinkled his nose and sniffed the wind. It was food! Goodness! He'd almost forgotten. Today was the festival of the harvest. Every village in the big forest was preparing a feast. The women were cooking yams and cassava and chicken with peanut flavored sauce, and there would be fish and peppers and rice boiling in the great pots over the fires. Spider's heart jumped for joy. His mouth watered, his eyes sparkled, and he smiled brightly. Already he could taste the food on his tongue. Now, of course, Spider had not done any of the work to deserve such a feast, and no one had invited him to come and eat. Spider had not planted one yam or potato. He had not planted rice, nor gone to sea in a long boat to catch fish. For Spider did not like to work at all. All day he played in the sun or slept. And since it is not the custom to refuse food to anyone who comes to one's door, he could eat very well by simply visiting all his friends. In fact, he ate more than they did. Now, Spider was right in the middle of the forest, and not far away there were 2 villages. Spider stood just in the middle, and the two were exactly the same distance away. Today, each village would have a great feast. How lucky for me, Spider thought. But then he was puzzled. Since there were two dinners, he didn't know which one he wanted to go to. Well, that is, he didn't know which one would have the most food to eat. So, Spider sat under a breadfruit tree and thought and thought and thought. At last, he had an idea. He could go to them both. Of course. Spider was so pleased with his good idea that he did a little dance right then and there. Oh, but how could he know when the food was ready? He sat under the breadfruit tree and thought and thought and thought. And then he had another idea. He did another little dance just because he was so brilliant. And then he did two things. First, he called his eldest son, Kuma. He took a long rope and tied one end around his waist. The other end he gave to his son. Take this rope to the village on the east, he said to Kuma. When the food is ready, give that rope a hard pull, and I will know it is time for me to come and eat. And so Kuma went to the east village and took the end of the rope with him. Then Spider called his youngest son, Kaweku. He took another long rope and tied it around his waist just below the first one. Kaweku, take this rope to the village on the west, he said, and when the food is all cooked, pull very hard on it. Then I will come and have my fill. So Kaweku went to the west village carrying the end of the rope with him. My friends, can you imagine what happened? Oh, I don't think so, so I will tell you. I'm going to pause just for a second. So the narrator in the story is kind of funny and talks to the reader. And that's another trait that you will find in a folk tale, that the storyteller or the narrator is almost like you're part of his audience, because these are stories that would have been told out loud. Back to the story. The people in the East Village and the people in the West Village had their dinners at exactly the same time. So, of course, Kuma and Kaweku pulled on both ropes at the same time. Kuma pulled to the east and Kaweku pulled to the west. The ropes got tighter and tighter. Poor greedy Spider was caught in the middle. He could neither go east nor west, nor left nor right. Kuma and Kaweku could not understand why their father did not come, and they pulled harder and harder all the time. And something was happening to Spider. The rope squeezed tighter and tighter, and his waist got thinner and thinner. Kuma and Kaweku waited until all the food was eaten, and then they came to look for their father. When they found him, he looked very different. His waistline was thinner than a needle, and Spider never grew fat again. He stayed the same until today. He has a big head and a big body and a tiny little waist in between. And so this folk tale explains why spiders look the way they do in nature. But obviously this story is a fiction story because that's really not how spiders got the shape of their bodies. So I hope you enjoyed that folk tale. If you're familiar with any of the Anansi stories, this is kind of the same character that you would have in an Anansi story. Okay, so um, that is the end of our lesson today. We've just begun to explore all the wonders of fiction. Throughout this unit, we're going to read some more amazing fiction stories. We're going to read some realistic fiction, some myths, some folk tales, and more. I hope you can tell from our experience today that writers write fiction to entertain their readers. It helps us engage our minds. It helps us imagine new worlds filled with so many different kinds of characters, settings, and events taking place. Thank you for listening.